Well, hello and welcome. This is our midweek reflection, a little bit later in the week, but I think it's still midweek regardless. And the heading I'm operating under this morning is in one word, and it is a strong word: illiterate. It is a strong word, and it is a word that I suspect none of us would like to be used to describe us as being illiterate. How would you feel if I were to tell you that you were indeed biblically, biblically illiterate? In a sense, that is exactly what Jesus had said to the most educated and well-read of the biblical experts of the day as he walked the earth here. The word illiterate, let's have a look at that. The word illiterate means unable to read or write. This is the definition and the explanation in the dictionary. Many people, certainly of older generations, would describe themselves as being computer illiterate. That would be to say that we don't necessarily have a complete understanding of the lingo of the language or the workings of that wonderful thing that controls so much of the world today. I've noted down some definitions of the word illiterate here. It says having little or no education, especially unable to read or write, an illiterate population. Another says showing or marked by a lack of acquaintance with the fundamentals of a particular field of knowledge. I found that one quite interesting. How did Jesus describe the highly educated upper class of the religious hierarchy? Well, Matthew chapter 23, we find Jesus saying, "Woe to you, blind guides, blind fools." They were blind to the truth, the true meaning of the word. They became blinded by their own ideas, their own desires. They were lost, if you like, in the guidance, or lost to the guidance of the Holy Spirit, of the revelation of truth from the Holy Spirit. They had a lack of acquaintance with the fundamentals. You can have all the humanly education that the world has to offer, but if we don't have the acquaintance with the basic fundamentals, then we are nothing but blind fools. And I have 2 points that I want to address in this week's little reflection. And we have the protests, I prefer to call them riots in Bristol, and something I heard about the vaccine on the news. We're going to use Luke chapter 19, just a little bit further down the road, as the foundation for the thoughts as we prepare to enter into Holy Week, of course, to go through the gate of Palm Sunday and into that holy city with Jesus, and into the Holy Week, which he himself travelled through, of course. Now, these problems that we're seeing in Bristol. The mayor of Bristol, for me, was a breath of fresh air. I heard him and he said this, or certainly words to this effect, but he certainly said these words: they were politically illiterate and had no idea the damage that they were doing to the cause that they were hiding behind. He also says that these people probably attend any form of protest that they know of, simply with the aim of violence and simply to protest against the establishment, and perhaps don't even know why they're doing it other than the fact that they are. This reminded me of the people of God who followed Jesus everywhere. They tried to trick him, they tried to catch him out, they opposed him no matter what he was saying or doing. People in the world today can be very much like that in relation to God. They simply do all they can to silence the truth from being spoken, from being held up, which was exactly what they were doing to Jesus in the days that he walked the earth, and of course all the days of that early church. There are many people, of course, today also who would describe themselves, consider themselves sincerely as people of God, and they're not very much different from those of that day. They're not properly acquainted with the truth and the reality of the word of the living God. They certainly know what their teachings, their culture and their tradition and what they've done and what they would like to do tells them. We should remember this much in everything that we read, every thought we have spiritually, that whenever we read harsh or corrective words in the New Testament, certainly, they are directed at the righteous, they are directed at the religious, they are directed at the church. And then we have the vaccine thought. The vaccine, of course, let me say, is a wonderful thing, absolutely, and we thank God for it. But this is the point that I'm going to. It was described by one news reporter just the other day there as ultimately the God of gods. Same person says that science was always the only way out of the pandemic. No mention of the true God, no mention of the one who gave the scientists, gives the scientists, who leads the scientists, who gives them the knowledge and indeed the elements to work with. Jesus, on his way into Jerusalem in Luke chapter 19, you read these words: as he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and he said, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. Now, there are many educated people in this world who use this passage and many passages like it with a lack of acquaintance, knowledge or understanding of it to attack the scriptures and dismiss God from the reality of life. And they'll say things like, if Jesus is so upset on the way to the city here that he weeps, then why is it that such a loving and wonderful God would hide from their eyes what it is that was going to bring them peace? Now, the passage, the Bible doesn't say that. It says that it is hidden from their eyes by themselves, by their actions, by their thought processes, by their ideas and desires. They are filled with self-righteousness, self-justification, self-preservation, and that was very much the people who were hounding him and ultimately killed him in that day. And that is what hid the truth from their eyes. The truth was never secret. It was never quiet. It was always open. Jesus was always open. He was always honest and very much public about what he was saying and doing, and why indeed he was saying and doing it. Now, this pandemic it is a terrible thing, and some of us actually believe that the Lord is at work within it. Not to say he created it, I don't know, but certainly he is at work within it. He's preparing people for a better way, pretty much like Jesus was doing in those days. But there is a greater, there is a longer lasting pandemic that has gripped humanity and gone largely unnoticed or acknowledged in the world by too many for too long. I call this pandemic Satan, and he has infected humanity, and he splits us into groups by his deceptions, much like the pandemic has different effects on different groups of people, as we are discovering. We have those who simply won't believe and want the truth to be kept quiet. We have a religious group who They may well be sincere in their desires to please God, but are in many ways simply illiterate. They are blind guides. They are caught in self-justifying self-preservation and to the appealing and the appeasing of humanity rather than to God and the truth of his word alone. We have those who face all opposition to hold up the truth and to obey the instructions of the truth. And Jesus is the vaccine to that pandemic. Remember, he says, if you, as he wept, even you had only known on this day what would bring you peace. And for all of these aforementioned reasons, so many people simply do not know. Now, I mentioned Luke chapter 19, and if you were to read through Luke chapter 19, it's a little bit long, but you know, you're talking 2 or 3 minutes of your day here. It's very interesting. It reveals a pattern. I see it in many ways as one more go, one more time, one more go at it from the Lord as he makes his way into the city for that Passion Week and ultimately to die for us, and shows us a pattern that he was trying to place into the hearts and minds of humanity. We see at the beginning a wealthy man, and that's interesting in itself because the blueprint for church says that we must seek out those who are poor in finance, who are poor, you know what I mean, who are poor, but this man was somewhat different. He was a wealthy man. He wasn't poor in material. He wasn't poor in finance. His name is Zacchaeus, and he realizes that he needs God. The truth is missing from his life. Now, the world's pattern doesn't reach out to people like that, but Jesus recognized in the equality of his divine heart of love for all that this man was a human being, a sinner in need of salvation. He was lost. Society tried to push him away and silence him, and Jesus sought him out. He welcomed him and he embraced him. Move on from there, and you will read the parable of the 10 minas as Jesus is giving us excuse me, a lesson on what we should do with anything that we receive from the Lord. And there's a lesson in there for those who do something with what the king had given them, the king to be had given them, and those who did not. And he makes the results of those choices very, very clear before he heads off into the city to accomplish his mission. Salvation for all who will believe. That was his mission. One and only thing. Tried to put so many things, and there are many wonderful lessons from Jesus and on many different subjects. One mission, ultimately one goal, and that is to bring salvation to all. He says in verse 10, as he finishes dealing with Zacchaeus in chapter 19, for the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. That was and is his aim. That's the mission. Before he ascended back to glory, he gives the same instructions to all who will claim his name. He says, of course, in Matthew chapter 28, therefore go and make disciples of all the nations. And we're falling into these categories of people under the deceptions of Satan, under the guise of political correctness and our fear of upsetting or offending people. I wonder, how do you think Jesus felt about political correctness when he called them blind guides, fools, and a brood of vipers? What do you think his priority was? The truth, upsetting them in order for them to see the truth of themselves and be saved, or to not upset them and watch them go to an eternity of hell and damnation? Because that is the truth, whether the church, the people in society want to acknowledge and serve it or not. When you lose something, let's say you lose your keys. Who hasn't lost their keys? Do you go and actively seek out the lost? Think of the frantic moments, the energy and the passion that you put into trying to find those keys. Do you go and actively seek the lost, or do you simply sit down, get on with your routines and hope that the keys find their way? This is what much of the church is doing in order to not upset people. But Jesus said, really, summed up in one little 2-letter word: go. Go. As he entered into the city for the final week, as we read it in Luke chapter 19, he concludes by telling us that he entered into the temple courts. He didn't like what he had found. They had lost their way. They were serving themselves, and he emptied the temple courts, and he gave them also a less than politically correct mouthful of truth in order to try and shake them up. Many will emerge from this pandemic seeking answers. There is a greater virus affecting humanity, and the truth of Jesus is the vaccine. Too many are walking blind, illiterate to the truth of God. The truth has been hidden from their eyes by traditions and cultural ways of political correctness. But remember Jesus. Remember the price that he paid. Remember the reason that he paid the price. Remember his one and only mission to seek and save the lost. Remember his solution and his instruction. Go. We're all illiterate to the spiritual truth of God, as opposed to simply the words on the page of the Bible. But Christ gives us a solution to that also. In his final words to the church before he ascends to glory, he says, "But you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem and in all Judea and Samaria and to the ends of the earth." That's Acts chapter 1 verse 8. Just before that, in verse 4, he says, "Do not leave Jerusalem, but wait for the gift my Father has promised, which you have heard me speak about." That's saying, don't just rush out there with your own ways. Wait until you have been blessed by the gift that the Father has promised, which you have heard him speak about. What did he say about that? John chapter 14, "If you love me, keep my commands, and I will ask the Father, and he will give you another advocate to help you and be with you forever, the Spirit of truth." Not just for a time, and then we'll put him away so that we don't need to be shaken up and upset anyone, but the Spirit forever. So he equips us, he teaches us, he uncovers the willing and obedient eyes, and then he says, go. Just as we are about to go into Palm Sunday and Holy Week, and remember that Jesus did go, and why he did it. It's a glorious truth, and it's not to be put away and kept for ourselves, but as in the parable of chapter 19, it is to be invested in society and in the mission of the Lord himself.